Prosecutors in the US have charged a North Korean national over attempted cyber attacks on government and military installations and private corporations. The US says the attacks are part of a North Korean effort to advance its nuclear program. The FBI urged critical infrastructure organisations to, quote, stay vigilant against such cyber operations.
North Korea continues to carry out these sophisticated intrusions targeting the U.S. as a way to fund their military programs, thereby threatening the U.S. and other countries in the region. Protecting our companies and our critical infrastructure requires partnership. We ask that companies contact the FBI as quickly as possible when they believe they're experiencing a ransomware event.
Right, for more, let's go to Gavin Wild. He's a senior fellow in the Technology and International Affairs program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and an information warfare expert. Welcome to DW. It appears North Korea gained access to several government agencies, including NASA. I wonder, besides stealing data, what kind of damage can they do once they've gained access like this?
Well, what you've seen, I think, more and more in the U.S. is this distinction of the type of activity we really worry about, which is pre-positioning, which means that there's really not a lot of time between stealing data for espionage purposes and then maybe exploiting it or disrupting it and rendering your networks inoperable. So over the past several years, you've seen a shift in how the U.S. government talks about defending against cyber espionage, away from these notions of wholesale prevention and defense and towards kind of redefining the trust relationships that are engineered into much of the hardware and the software and the networks we use in the first place, so that at the very least we can limit the degree of mobility that intruders have once they've burrowed into a network, and we can more quickly and easily mitigate and recover after detecting them.
We hear a lot about the arms race in terms of traditional weapons. I wonder, how serious is the cyber warfare arms race becoming at this point?
Well, as we've seen, I think certainly in the war in Ukraine, we're always going to be in a race with our digital adversaries to leverage any advantage that the digital space might afford. And certainly cyberspace means that the dependency that we all have on cyberspace means that disruptions are certainly possible, if not likely, in the event of a geopolitical conflict. However, I think one of the lessons that folks are trying to draw out of the war in Ukraine, and certainly the cyber aspects of Russia's war on Ukraine, the degree to which that disruption for its own sake, that only loosely complements or coincides with conventional military operations, can really be decisive. So my sense is at least that espionage and intelligence gathering are always going to be really the focal point and where cyber capabilities are most useful. Making cyber warfare kind of this centerpiece of conventional military conflict is an awful lot harder. And so I think there's still, as much as states are going to compete for those competitive advantages, I think warfare might be a limited frame through which we can kind of think about cyber operations.
Just briefly, we hear a lot about how much effort is being made to defend against cyber attacks, but how does the US defend its digital infrastructure from cyber espionage like this?
Well, so the flip side of that dynamic that I outlined before, I think, is that much of U.S. critical infrastructure and industry runs on privately owned and operated networks, which means the federal government can't simply impose or provide a degree of security for them. And in light of the geopolitical tensions the U.S. faces, I think the private sector's gradually come to understand that they're not immune from cyber espionage or disruption purely by dint of not being state-run. But however much progress we've made in the last few years in this regard, I think there are still those sectors like healthcare, education, municipal governments that live below the so-called cyber poverty line,
right,
where they're so deeply reliant on outdated systems and lack the resources to do routine cyber hygiene that a spate of recent attacks demonstrates the need to shore them up.
Gavin Wild in Washington, D.C., thanks so much for your input.